access the podcast of OA. Located deep within Sector 14845 and powered by the Emerald Light of Will, the podcast of OA is your guide to the Green Lantern universe. Hosted by Lantern Myron Rumsey, the podcast of OA begins now.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Myron Rumsey, and you're listening to the podcast of OA, episode number 147, your Green Lantern podcast. And I am joined by my good friend, Phil Bova. Phil, my friend, how are you doing this evening?
Everything's great here in St. Louis, Missouri. My wife and I went to our the big ultrasound today, and we found out what the sex of the baby was, and we're going to keep that close to the chest, and we're not telling anybody until the baby's born in January.
You can whisper it. It's okay. We won't tell.
Okay, fine. It's Simon Baz.
If it's a boy, you're going to name him Bruce.
Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
Bruce Wayne Bova. Speaking of Bruce Wayne, real quick, it was funny because I posted a picture on Twitter today on my account, and it was Barry Allen, full-fledged going full on Batman's face, and there was a spread panel out of one of the comic books, and I started a thread. I was like, everybody just start throwing on different panels where Batman's getting knocked on his butt or getting punched out. And a few people replied. I was a little sad though, because I wanted more people to start posting stuff. I need to see more. It made my day happy.
Things are good here. School started up here in New York, and this week, so it's been a little crazy, to be quite honest. I had fun last week or so. I took my cousin, his son, who is 22, took him to see Kiss on their farewell tour at an amusement park a couple hours away from here. And it's where I took him 9 years ago for his first Kiss concert. And he's quite a huge fan. He's actually gone on the cruise and so on. And he was repaying me taking him to his first show by buying the tickets. And he bought us 10th row seats.
Oh, man. That's a good time right there.
Quite a show. So it was just him and me. It was a great time. So it was great, but I'm excited to be back here talking with you and talking about Green Lantern stuff.
Yeah, we got a lot of stuff to talk about.
Yeah, there's some interesting rumors going around. I don't know if you saw the one about a Kyle Rayner series on HBO Max.
I did see that. I was kind of curious of why HBO Max of all things,
Well, I think that they're going to have more money to spend on original content than DC Universe is, but I didn't pick up on the story because I don't really consider it a story. It's a rumor. And the website that's promoting these rumors, that we got this covered, it seems like every day they have some kind of a scoop that they announce some wild rumor that really isn't factual. And I refuse to jump on the bandwagon and reprint this stuff because it seems like what happens is they'll do something and then Cosmic Book News will repeat it and Bounding Into Comics will repeat it. And eventually it gets repeated enough times that people start thinking that it's factual and it's just a wild rumor. And I'm not going to get into this unsubstantiated rumor stuff because their track record, they have no inside scoops that we know of. I can't think of anything they've ever promoted as a scoop that they actually got right. So why give them the time of day? I think if they were to do something, I can't see them doing a Green Lantern show. I just don't think for a weekly TV show live action, the budget is really going to be there for it. Now, on the other hand, the other thing going around is John Diggle becoming John Stewart in the big DC Arrowverse Crisis on Infinite Earth special. And I can certainly see that happening. They kind of built up to that a little bit by talking about John Diggle's father's name, his last name being Stewart. And in that last Crisis event, there was a scene where John Wesley Shipp's Flash character looks at John Diggle and says basically, "Where's your ring?" essentially. So I can see it happening. I'm a little disappointed in the Arrowverse because they early on said that they wouldn't tease something that didn't pay off. And we've had comments about Hal Jordan alluded to from the very beginning of the Flash stuff. And we've seen them in Coast City. We saw Arrow in Coast City, Oliver Queen pre-Arrow in Coast City early on. And they just haven't followed through on that. And it's really quite a shame to see that you've got Ollie and Barry, whose best friend is Hal Jordan, and him not even show up sans ring, even just as a pilot. Or, you could do something on a small screen for one episode. We've seen a lot of effects for the Flash and Firestorm and so on. You could probably get away with it for an episode, especially a big crossover event like the Crisis stuff. But to me, it will be really a shame and a missed opportunity if Arrow goes off the air at the end of this next season and we never get to see Ollie and Hal and Barry together.
Yeah, and and it's funny because like Time Warner or Warner Brothers, whichever you want to use. I mean, it seems like the CW is their only place where they really have good decent content. I never really got involved with Arrow all that much because I'm not much of a Green Arrow fan. But I watched enough of it to know that it was done well. And the characters were the characters were interesting. And the same goes for the Flash, and I really got into that. I thought it was fantastic, and I loved Grant Gustin as Barry Allen. I thought he nailed the role. He was perfect. I wish he would have crossed over to the movie because I don't like the whole dynamic that these companies play where they have the same character that's showing on the CW, but yet in a big screen movie, it's not the same actor. I think that confuses people a little bit more.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's something about making it look like it's the same person or being the same person on the small screen and the big screen. I know for me personally, I really did not care for Ezra Miller's version of the Flash, and I'd much rather see Grant Gustin. My opinion on the Arrowverse is I really liked both shows in their earlier seasons, but as time has gone on, I felt like they don't know where to go. Like for me, Green Arrow is never someone who's going to have a group of other heroes that he's going to have with him, like Wild Dog and Mr. Terrific and those guys. I just don't see that, and it's a shame that they took Black Canary and kind of twisted it into something it was never originally meant to be. And my problem with the Flash show has only been that it seems like at this point every member of the cast has gotten speed powers over the last few seasons.
Right.
But
right.
I guess creatively they've got to do different things to keep it going. But I really, really, really wanted to see Barry and Hal and Ollie together. Because I think this is probably the only chance we're going to get for that. I think even if we start seeing more of the movies and we see a Flash movie and we see a Green Lantern Corps movie, the odds of seeing Green Arrow, Flash, and Green Lantern together is pretty slim. This to me seems like it's going to be the only opportunity to have that happen in live action. So for me, it's a real shame if it doesn't follow through.
Well, I'm actually surprised that Berlanti didn't suggest that or didn't even try to spin that off of these series that are, especially with like Legends of Tomorrow. Even a Green Lantern character could have worked easily into that particular series, and the way they go with like bringing Brandon Routh, making him a Kingdom Come Superman and bringing back all these, Burt Ward's even coming into this, and it's like, they're bringing back all these characters for this big crossover event. I just don't see how you can have a big Crisis crossover event and not have a Green Lantern character involved in some fashion. And it still mystifies me that these people, that these creators, these producers don't understand that, because there's a lot of fans out there. Yeah, sure, it might be glazed over. Green Lantern's not in there. They just don't know. But there's a crap ton of fans that know that Green Lantern has been a permanent cog in this Justice League wheel for years and years and years. And here in the past, go back how many years now? And it just seems like he's just taking the back burner. And I don't know, man. I don't get it. And you can't get a straight answer from anybody because, nobody supplies any information.
No, and
fans.
Berlanti co-wrote the first draft of the script of the Green Lantern movie, so he's certainly familiar with the character.
Sure.
You've had, as I mentioned before, I think in the pilot for the Flash, they mention a pilot missing from Ferris Air, and you've had Ferris Air throughout both shows, and you've had Coast City, and that's been mentioned multiple times, plus the aforementioned part where Arrow took place in Coast City for some of the flashback stuff. And you even had a character wearing a bomber jacket with the name Jordan that flashed really, really quickly across the screen. And then you had, I don't know whether people realize who this character was, but there was a season of Arrow where there was a character named Susan Williams that was in the show. And she actually is the person who ends up marrying Hal Jordan's brother and is the one that thought that Hal's brother was Green Lantern.
Interesting. Now that I did not know. And it just brings up this point about these teases that they always play out. Yeah, I don't mind that they throw out the teases. I mean, that's just bait for us fans to sit there and get, we get salivating over that. But to not deliver on it, I mean, that's kind of cheating the fans. And that's where you lose your fan base to me. I mean, it's like, okay, you're going to have these lead ups. You're going to have all these little clues you're going to throw out there, these little Easter eggs that every fandom knows when it comes to the comic book universe. We rely on Easter eggs. I mean, that's our go-to. And then just pull the carpet out and don't even give us anything. It's kind of like, okay, what's the point? Why'd you even bother? I don't know. It's just stuff like that kind of upsets me. And the DC universe, I don't know what your thoughts are on it. I mean, to me, I think it's mishandled. I don't think they launched it very well. I mean, I wanted to subscribe, but then I pulled back because, I mean, just stuff kept getting, axed, like, Swamp Thing. I mean, I was a fan. I loved it. But it just seems like, I don't know. Something's not clicking right at DC where things aren't being handled in a very cohesive manner. Now, hopefully this new CEO that took over for Warner Brothers it's going to right the ship. Susan, what's her last name? Do you remember?
I don't recall what her last name is.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I've heard good things about her, that she's going to fix what's broken and all that. But, you hear that stuff all the time. And I don't know, man. I stick to my guns when it comes to the DC stuff. And I like my characters like Wonder Woman, and I like the Flash and the Green Lantern, and I'll read those core characters. But when I see so much time and so much energy invested in, and I hate to say it, I mean, Batman. I mean, for God's sakes, there's 26 titles of Batman being released in this month alone, and it's like, really? I mean, I'm not a Batman fan, and I appreciate every Batman fan out there, but do we really need that many Batman titles in a month when you get, 4 Green Lanterns? And then, of course, you got 5 Superman titles being released because of Bendis alone. That's just, I don't know, man. DC has been is different lately, and I love them, but I question some of their methods,
I think with DC Universe, I think it hurt them a little bit that they didn't get themselves ready to be available in other countries. So right now it's still only in the US, and I think that's denied them a lot of revenue. Something interesting that came out of Terrificon, and I didn't hear it firsthand, but Donny Cates was talking that he said to somebody that while he was getting ready to maybe entertain going to DC and doing some work there, that Dan Didio pitched him a Green Lantern Corps book. And he turned it down. So apparently DC is looking to do something more with the Green Lantern Corps, but I don't know whether they just haven't found the right creative team or what their plans are at this point.
I guess it all gears towards their target audience and who they're trying to get, involved in the Green Lantern. I don't know. I mean, like you said, your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah. And, one good thing is, we talked in the last episode, I talked about going to Terrificon and talking to Liam Sharp. I have communicated with him since, we talked at the last podcast, and, he's going to come on the show. His schedule's been a little crazy, and he needed to get the 12th issue wrapped up. And I talked to him a little bit about maybe, trying to record right around the time the 12th issue comes out, but he's been pretty hectic schedule wise. He's all over the place, but he suggested maybe coming on the show to talk about season 2 after the Green Lantern's Black Star book gets over with, and maybe talking to him during the launch of season 2. So I said to him, absolutely, that would be fantastic. And we'll see what happens between now and then, but that's the plan right now. And, speaking of other stuff coming out in November, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about Green Lantern Far Sector.
Yeah. So Far Sector issue 1, written by M.K. Jemison, I guess that's how you pronounce the name, and art by Jamal Campbell gets released in November. And I've kind of been doing some side work on kind of looking up kind of what its purpose is and stuff like that, and kind of trolling around some of the different sites and seeing what kind of feedback it was getting. And it's kind of curious because a lot of what I've read has been a lot of the overabundance of human Green Lanterns. And you and I have discussed that many times before. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners have even probably complained about it and stuff before. But, a point of note here on Reddit, which, it's not a reliable source, but you get really, really good feedback towards how the fandom operates. And oddly enough, this person named Bat Knight number 12 said, that there's been a lot of complaint about there's too many human GLs and not enough alien ones, and yeah, you're right. They have, look how many Green Lanterns they have, yet we only really, really focus on the human ones. And this person said, since a big part of the GL is about exploring different alien cultures and peoples, it's unfortunate so many point of view characters in the GL are human. It limits perspective because we're always going to get a human point of view of things. And, that was one of the comments that kind of stuck out to me the most, because Grant Morrison in this latest series that him and Liam have been doing, it's Hal centered, but you do see different approaches from these different lanterns that get the screen time, if you know what I mean. Because it's like this last issue went kind of back and forth between where Hal was on Earth 15, and then of course back to Volk and the other ones who are on a different universe altogether. And but I'm looking forward to the series. I don't think it's going to be interconnected in any way, and I don't think it's part of the Young Animals imprint or whatnot. So it looks cool. I read some of the interviews that Jemison did, and it sounds intriguing. I'll probably pick it up, and at some point in the future when we have a podcast, I might do a little review on it, just to touch base with some of the people out there who might be interested in themselves. But again, I'm going to go back to what I originally said. I'm not big on the fact that we're going to get another human Green Lantern. I don't think we need any more. And point of note on this one too, Myron, is apparently she doesn't need a battery to recharge her ring. There you go, man.
I know she said in interviews she really doesn't know anything about Green Lantern, and that's fine. But boy, at least I don't know. But I agree. There's a lot of human Green Lanterns, and I go back to that same thing I think I said when we were talking about Green Lantern Legacy: is do you create a false expectation for the reader that picks this up as their first Green Lantern book, and then when they go to check out other DC Comics, that character is nowhere to be found because this is, for all intents and purposes, an Elseworlds.
Yeah, it really is. And I don't think there's going to be any kind of tie-in whatsoever. So, the art looks good. The character looks cool. But I'll be honest with you, there's a lot more Green Lanterns that I've read about over the course of my life that look cool as well, that could have carried their own book. This is a Young Animal imprint, so this is a different target audience. But again, this falls into this different narrative that I think DC is getting away. It seems like there's getting these different titles in there, and it's funny because Jessica Cruz has become very popular since she's come on the scene way back when Forever Evil, when she was teased, and and now this another female Lantern, and and then you got the Teen Lantern. I don't even know that thing's name. I don't even read about the Teen Lantern at all, but I don't know. This narrative is shifting when it comes to the Green Lantern stuff, and it seems like it's carrying away from the Green Lantern core, and they're going off in all these offshoot titles.
Well, to me, it goes back to what I consider creative bankruptcy, in that it's easier to take a new idea and graft it onto an existing franchise than it is to actually come up with something original.
Yeah.
It
really is.
How many Flashes do we need? How many Green Lanterns do we need? But again, I don't want to turn this into a complaining festival, but we'll see what happens. But we've got a great comic book to talk about in the Green Lantern number 11. This is the lead up to the finale. So there's, I think, more going on than what we might think it does at first glance. I know I missed something key in my review that one of our listener feedbacks is going to touch on later on in the episode, and I'll probably bring it up during the conversation just because it'll be topical. But I think there's some interesting things. So why don't you and I pause for a minute? We'll play a promo for either another podcast, or maybe I'll play that Jon Stewart promo again because I really kind of liked it.
So cool.
And then we'll be back after a second, and we'll start talking about the new issue of the Green Lantern.
All right.
Listen up, Lanterns. It's time you took the oath with Green Lantern Jon Stewart. In brightest day, in blackest night, don't let the podcast of Oa escape your sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power. Green Lantern's light.
All right, well, we're back to start talking about the Green Lantern issue number 11. And this issue is really kind of crazy, Phil. What did you think about it?
Man, it was really, really complex. I'm not going to lie. I had to run through it a couple times to really, really get the crux of what was going on. And, and there might be a lot of stuff in here that I more than likely missed that I know that you probably didn't, that I'm going to probably need some help with myself.
It was pretty interesting. I love seeing the Green Lanterns from the multiverse. To me, that's always been very, very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And we see more and more of that in this issue. We see the Green Lanterns that this character who we find out his identity in this issue, we find that those characters are even more characters from the multiverse. We see a version of Kyle. We see the Kingdom Come Green Lantern. There's a little bit of everything mixed in there all together. But this individual is named Zundernell. And I did some research, couldn't find anything about Zundernell anywhere. Must be a completely new character that Grant Morrison has come up with. And it's interesting that he proclaims himself as being the Golden Lantern, considering supposedly in the Legion of Superheroes book, there's going to be a Gold Lantern.
Interesting. Is that the new one that just came out this week?
I don't know. I don't know if it's out yet or not. It might be.
There was a Legion of Superheroes. I think that came out this. Maybe that was Legionnaires.
Yeah, I'm not sure. But, right from the very beginning, it's interesting because, we start out with that planet Werewoman. I loved how Liam Sharp made it look like an apple that was being chomped, that had been, there's just a core there in the outer edges of this apple of a planet. And that's the planet where Belzebeth was back in the 4th issue when she was retrieving the antimatter Green Lantern. And
it's cool how he ties that back, I mean, it's almost like Grant Morrison never leaves any stone unturned with stuff that he uses past, and he uses it all the way up into the present. Yeah. I love how he does that. And it makes it feel more real because he takes these little details and they cycle back around again. And even if you don't pick up on it, it's neat that he put that level in there. But I loved seeing Stel and Bizzed and Trillatru. And then the other Green Lantern that's there is a guy named Tubine. And we haven't seen him, I don't think, in a long, long time. But that was cool. And Sinestro shows up, and I'm still contending that it's not our Sinestro. To me, that's the Andy Manor Universe Sinestro. I believe that to be. And then I love the interaction between Hal and Bat Lantern, and that one panel, which has been shared around the world, where Hal makes an observation about Batman. Pretty funny stuff. It is. And I'm like, I was at work when you sent that to me on the Twitter, and that came through, and I looked down and I saw it. I just started cracking up laughing. Some of my students were standing there, and one of them, I got a bunch of them that are comic book fans, and a couple of them are huge Batman fans. And one of the kids, I showed it to him. One of the kids looked at me and said, "Well, he's not wrong." The whole Zundernell thing is really kind of cool. Interesting character. I mean, I love the Green Lantern logo in his eyes and so on. And the way he's played off here is he sounds like he's kind of a bumbling, crazed old man. And when Hal and Carol Ferris from Earth, is it Earth 11? Yeah, Earth 11. When the two of them interact with him, they kind of make him look like he's a guy who's lost his way and doesn't realize that he's just lonely and tilting at windmills like Don Quixote. Yeah, kind of like he's got dementia, I mean, he's just like you said. And I like the way he plays it off with Hal Jordan, because Hal Jordan tries to rationalize with him on many different occasions, and of course, Zundernell is not having it, because he's got this God complex about him that I think is a little bit over his head. I mean, to me, I like the character, but personally, it felt like a kind of a bumbling version of what a God could be. If that makes any sense. I thought it was really neat that he had basically excavated out the monitor technology so he could watch all the different worlds of the multiverse. Yeah, that was cool. Yeah, that was really cool. But yeah, you kind of wondered, is he crazy or isn't he?
And, we're going to read a comment later on from John, who sent me an observation he had about this issue. And I didn't pick up on it. So I kind of want to share a few things with you, Phil, to see what you think. But there's a few key lines that Zundernell says. And one of them, he's talking about, Zundernell with his broken lamp and twisted throne. Eternal night is fast approaching. And then he talks about when the multi-crisis is upon us, the Grail will awaken. You will see. And then he says near the end, when he's talking about the guys that he's got trapped, they're his knights. He says, they slumber who will rise again in all of creation hours of greatest need. Knights of the cosmic grail. Sir Zundernell shall lead them onto the ultimate battlefield, the living lantern rekindled. And, they make it sound like when Hal finds the broken power battery, that this is like, well, he's not even protecting anything. But when you go to the end, when they arrest Zundernell, there's a 3-panel thing that Liam Sharp has, and you see kind of the close-up of the battery. Mm-hmm. And if you look, the first panel, there's nothing going on really other than some kind of smoldering stuff. But then when you look at the second picture, there's some little green orbs that are heading into the lantern. Right. And then when you get to the bottom panel, there's a whole bunch more. So is Zundernell crazy, or does he just kind of resign himself to the fact that these beings that he's asked to help him are just incapable of understanding the threat that's coming?
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't pick up on that before, but now that you got that 3-panel, that 3-panel thing there. I mean, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of them too in that last panel. Now, are they going into the lantern, or are they coming out? Well, I guess they would be going in, wouldn't they?
Yeah. So is something happening to make that lantern come more alive, which fulfills the prophecy that Zundernell's talking about?
And who do you think they're talking about overall?
I don't know. That's I have no answers when it comes to that. Could
it be the return of Volthoom?
Gosh, I don't know. But, it reminds me of something that Grant Morrison talked about when he was being interviewed about this series, in that he said, this book is about the Green Lantern, not the character, but about the Green Lantern, the lantern. And is this the lantern he's talking about?
I wonder if they're going to be talking about a Guardian. I wonder if this is how they're going to bring in a Guardian.
Right, I don't know. There's obviously something more to Zundernell than we know because of the Green Lantern logo eyes.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I'm concerned about, because they're playing a lot off of, if I remember correctly, Quaman. They're playing a lot off of Cord, right? Which is the other universe. Let me see if I can remember this correctly. It's been a while. That's the other universe opposite the antimatter universe, correct?
Right. Cord was originally the antimatter universe, and that was where Sinestro was from, and the Weaponers of Cord, obviously, and so on. And that there's that universe, but then there's the antimatter universe, which is also kind of unique. So I don't know. I mean, there's so much potential here. There's so much here that we won't necessarily know it from this issue. It's going to all make sense later, I think.
Well, and if you know Grant Morrison, like we've read up until this point, I mean, he leaves those breadcrumbs, and they're not easy to follow. Like yourself, I do a lot of, I try to go back and I try to research some of these characters or some of these events and stuff like that, and try to find out where they existed at and where they're from. And you and I have talked about 11 issues now, and each issue we find ourselves looking for more and more and more clues. You know what I mean? But for each issue that comes out next, I mean, we've often found ourselves either wrong or, we were off a little bit, but kind of right, But I mean, Morrison just seems to weave this little web of his, and he doesn't make it easy for Lantern fans to figure out exactly what his purpose is.
It reminds me a lot of the early days of the Jeff Johns run, where he would start to tease little things and it'd be little nuggets of information. And I know I would spend hours trying to figure out what the heck he's doing. And I almost feel that way again with Grant Morrison, although I don't put as much energy into thinking about it because I know I can't figure out what Morrison is doing. But boy, I like the fun of the conjecture and speculation.
I do. And I really like how far he's come with this book. You could tell even up until this point how much thought and how much effort has went into making this title, and not only that, making it his own. a side note question: what do you think of Carol Ferris from Earth 15?
Earth 11? Yeah.
Earth 11.
I really liked her. I thought it was really kind of comical that they're instantly attracted to each other, realize that they are from different realities, and realize that, there's some freedom that comes with not having the baggage of the history you have with the other individual. So maybe a romantic relationship might not be a bad idea, kind of thing. It's interesting. I love the costume redesign that Liam Sharp gave her. To me, it looks like a very logical progression of Carol's Silver Age Star Sapphire outfit.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I like what they did with it. I like her short hair. I think the short hair looks awesome. I hope they stay with that particular characterization of her, because the outfit's completely cool. I mean, she just looks really cool with the boots and everything. Yeah, I loved it. It looks amazing.
I thought it was interesting. I didn't see a ring on her.
I'm trying to look right now. I don't know if I see one either.
So I don't know whether they've gone back to the tiara kind of having part of it. And I was just kind of thinking about it because you see her have a construct in her hand, or, that kind of thing. Like she makes a lantern up and it just comes from her hands.
That's a good point. Yeah. I don't know either. That's really, really interesting. I didn't even think about that myself.
But they're fun to read together. I did like it. I think it would be really hysterical if he ran into our version of Carol and that version of Carol at the same time. Boy, that could be interesting.
And it'd be cool to see what how that narrative would go. Especially since obviously this Carol knows that there's a past history of Hal on that other universe. It'd be funny to see how they would banter back and forth.
Yeah, I think it'd be really fun. I would pay to read that.
Hey, what'd you think of the groovy, really, really groovy lantern oath?
I thought that was really cool. I love that scene where we see all the Green Lanterns charging their batteries or their rings. They raise their hands up and they're all doing their little oath thing. And I thought, oh, that's so cool. That was such a neat moment.
It really was, and it's really. I love the oaths anyway. I liked when they had the oaths for the other colors of the spectrum. I like when that stuff was going around back then too. And this one was really interesting because he's creating different oaths from different lanterns across different multiverses, and it's just fun.
What'd you think of Spectra?
I don't know. I mean, kind of so. I liked Quaman. I liked Quaman. I thought he looked really, really, really cool. At the end when he was coming out.
What I thought was interesting with Spectra is that she shoots a white beam out of her eyes. It hits the little prism on her hand and then turns into a rainbow of light.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, you're right. That is kind of cool.
And again, another new character. There's been various characters called Spectra in the past, really associated with like the Blackhawks in the Golden Age and early Silver Age, but nothing like this. So I believe she's again yet another new character, which is cool.
Is now the one that wears the cowl and the green looks like the green garment, and she's carrying the staff with the lantern at the top. Is that a new? Now she's been in the series before, but is she a new character for Grant Morrison?
She is from the Tangent universe, and there were a series of comics that came out. I'm trying to think about when that was because it was a while ago. But yeah, there was a Tangent universe on DC Comics. Gosh, my brain is starting to go. Yeah, gosh, it was Tangent Comics. It was a comic event in like the 90s, and it was something that Dan Jurgens created.
Okay, all right.
But yeah, there were different versions of different characters, and she was one of them.
Okay, now I was gonna look. I really like her. I like her costume, and I like how she carries around the lantern like that. I think that's really cool. And I liked her in the previous issues. Do you remember her name by chance?
I don't know as if they've actually given her a name.
I didn't think they did, or else I thought I would have picked up on that. Okay, well, I'm going to do some research into that and look her up. I really like her. I think she's cool.
Yeah, I think she's really a cool character. Very visually interesting. The other neat thing was that, the other large creature that was fighting the Superwatch or dealt with the Superwatch turns out to be Border Patrol, and he learns to talk and communicate in this issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there was a lot of stuff revealed in this that's been led up to.
And the Quaman is coming, and very interestingly at the end, there's that ominous thing that you see all the Green Lanterns together, and They say Hal Jordan has 25 minutes to live.
The countdown has begun. And, of course, you see Sinestro there, too, as well.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how he wraps it up. I don't know what's coming next. I really don't. I think for one of the first times in a long time, I have no ideas of where Grant's going to take it.
Well, I mean, and just remember that this is going to spin off into Dark Stars for the 3-issue arc until season 2 picks up, right? If I remember correctly.
Yep. The Green Lanterns Black Stars will be a 3-issue miniseries after this next issue. So it starts in November for 3 months.
So I wonder if whatever takes place in 12, obviously whatever takes place in 12 will lead into Black Stars. So something's going to happen in the next issue that's going to spin that off into that 3-issue arc. So
yeah. And the art, as usual, is on point.
As always, it's Liam.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's Liam. I mean, it's just Liam at his finest, and you know, his developing skills. It's evolving. You know, and in each issue creates this different resonance in it that, you know, I mean, each one is at its own kind of theme when it's come to the art itself, and you know, I can't express that enough to that man as a how he draws. I mean, sometimes you read these books, you know, and sure, we sit there and we read them because we're fans and stuff like that. But a lot of times I'll just sit there and be like, you know, I can't imagine sitting at a desk and conceiving this kind of stuff in my mind, let alone being able to create this kind of stuff on a piece of paper, you know, a sketch myself, because I can't draw. I mean, I can't even draw a stick figure worth a damn. But these guys, I mean, and just the way their skills work, sometimes it blows my mind. I mean, even with the artwork and stuff like that, it just blows my mind. And Liam has just always been there, you know, and always back at Brave and the Bold. And, you know, I don't know, I see him evolving a lot. And I've seen his art in this Green Lantern series, you know, just come a long way. And even from his own skill set.
My favorite page where Hal kisses his ring back in issue 7.
Mm-hmm.
That original page is up for sale. It's $1,500, and I tried to talk my wife into it. Said, hey, you know, this would be a great Christmas present for the next 3-4 years.
Rest of my life.
The rest of my life, you know. But she didn't nibble on that one.
$1,500, huh?
$1,500, yeah. Did you see the variant cover for this issue?
No, I don't think I did.
So it's interesting. It's got Hal on the cover making basically a stylized Infinity logo, only it's not rounded. It's kind of flat on the edges. Do you remember back in the day when that used to be the Green Lantern greeting?
Yeah, somebody actually, I didn't know that, but somebody posted about it, I think, on a social media site. And I was like, that's interesting. I wonder what that symbol's all about. And the person explained it in there, what it was used for.
Yeah, it was like back in the 80s. I think it was in the Mike W. Barr run where they had that as a greeting. So when Green Lanterns would see each other, they would make that infinity symbol construct. So I thought it was really cool that an artist kind of redid that a little bit. It's cool.
Yeah, it's cool, especially using it for a variant.
Yeah. No, another good issue. I don't necessarily think it was one of the strongest issues of the run so far, but looking back on it after rereading it a few times, I can see where it was kind of the necessary setup for the finale.
Yeah, I'm more intrigued by what the finale is going to bring us than, I mean, but you're right. This issue, I mean, there's been plenty of other issues that's been before this that I really, really liked a lot more. But I mean, this one was cool. Has Quaman been around before?
Nope. He's something new.
So he's something new. Okay. There was a lot of stuff in here that I didn't see before, and I was like, you know, I just didn't know if that was my old brain working. And then I got to thinking to myself, I was like, you know, I'm going to have to ask Myron for a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, it seems like, you know, every time I read an issue, I end up doing a lot of Googling afterwards because there are either things that I don't remember them or not. You know, I may remember them, may not. And if I don't, I look them up just to see is it something that came from comics history or is it something new?
Yeah.
So, you know, Morrison's creativity is really fantastical. And again, I think that these books will read even better in trade in collected editions because I think the story flows better. I think sometimes it's hard to remember some of these details on a month-to-month basis, but when you sit down and read it in its entirety, it's going to hold up a whole lot more.
And which is what I think I'm going to revisit after the conclusion is up. I think I'm going to do the same thing or go back and read them all, you know. through and through, just sit down and go straight through it and read it. Because, I mean, sometimes I can't, sometimes with the release of other stuff that comes out, I don't know how many comics you read on a weekly or monthly basis, but I mean, sometimes you're, okay, I'm really involved in this storyline, but then over here, this storyline's going on in this comic book. And sometimes it becomes convoluted and you forget what takes place in one or the other. And I found that sometimes with the Green Lantern stuff, mainly because Grant Morrison is so dense in his writing, you know, and it's like a thicket trying to make your way through it, you know, until you see the light. And oddly enough, here we are.
I'll be 55 later this month, and my brain does not work as good as it used to. So trying to keep track of all the different plots on monthly books over a long period of time is not working the way it used to. I tell you. So yeah, I'm looking forward to, after this 12th issue is out, is going back and rereading all 12 of them back to back.
So so going into the conclusion, which we've only got one more. So what would you give this first year run with Grant Morrison and Liam Sharp? I mean, how do you think it weighs against like other versions, like with maybe Jeff Johns or Venditti's run? You know, how do you think it measures up against those?
I think it, if you go back and look at Jeff Johns' run, the first year he was kind of rebuilding things. And, you know, he was in a position where he had to, because he was reestablishing the entire franchise. Whereas Grant's got the luxury of only dealing with Hal. And so I think it's almost an apples to oranges comparison. The same with Venditti. I'll be honest, I don't think the beginning of Venditti's run was necessarily his strongest work. I think he walked into it not knowing enough about Green Lantern, and an editorial let him do things like Lights Out, which I don't really think was a really good story to tell for Green Lantern, to be very honest. His Rebirth stuff was much better, but again, I think he was hindered by the fact that he was juggling 4 characters in one book, and how do you serve 4 masters and try to tell a compelling story with the Sinestro Corps War and everything else all at once. Mm-hmm. So I think Morrison's lucky in that he was given Hal to work with and basically nothing else he had to use. So I think Morrison's run is really strong because of the creative freedom he's got.
Makes sense. Yeah, I agree with all that. You know, I like Morrison's stuff, and I always will. I mean, he's a prolific writer. As far as looking back to the first 11 issues of this, and I still like Venditti's, and I hate saying this like this, but I like Venditti's run a little bit better than I like this one. Only because, I mean, I've always enjoyed Venditti as a writer anyway, and even as Hawkman is really, really, really good. But I really enjoyed seeing more of the Green Lantern stuff in there, even though, like you said, like Lights Out wasn't that good and whatnot. And you know, I was a big fan of. He didn't write Renegade, did he? When Hal went Renegade?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah,
he did.
See, and I was a big fan of that story arc, and Hal's costume during that time was probably one of my all-time favorites. I know popular opinion probably goes against me on that one, but it was still cool to me because it was nuanced, and I liked the way it looked. It looked rugged, and I've always envisioned Hal like that. But I liked Venditti's a little bit better.
Well, the Renegade arc is interesting. I know a little inside baseball about that, and I don't want to betray any confidence that was given to me, but what we got was not necessarily, I don't think, what was planned. I'll just put it that way.
Okay.
But I did like what the idea was behind it. And I think Venditti's pre-Rebirth run, his New 52 stuff, I think there was so much editorial interjection that I don't think that he got necessarily to tell what he wanted to tell. And you can see the difference when he got to Rebirth, where he basically was handed the keys to the kingdom and said, here, go do whatever you want to do. Just leave Jessica and Simon Baz out of it.
Yeah, that was a big change. That was a big shift. I remember that that happened with a lot of books too, not just Green Lantern. But there was a big cultural shift when that took place.
And Robert is I think is a very talented writer, and he's a very long form writer. And I think he makes plans, just in talking to him, he's been on the show 5 times. And one of the things that became very clear about him is that he's somebody who writes the long story, and he plants seeds for things so that they seem organic when they pay off later. And if they never come to fruition, they don't. but his plan is, he makes those kind of plans. And I think in New 52, he made some plans that he was forced to change that caused him to go in directions he maybe didn't want to go in.
Probably because New 52 was for lack of a better word, failure.
Yeah. It's funny because I have found myself less connected to the DC universe since Rebirth. I found myself more connected to the DC universe during the New 52.
Really?
Yep. I was reading many more DC books. I felt like it was one universe. When Rebirth hit, it seemed like continuity went out the window. I didn't care for the Superman in the jeans and some of the other stuff that was going on. I felt almost disenfranchised.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with the Superman part of that.
But anyway, this has been another great issue, and I can't wait to talk about the next one. So let's pause. I know we've got a couple of comments that came in to the website that I want to share. One of them, I kind of stole a little bit of John's thunder in talking about stuff, but I definitely want to make sure we read his comment.
Okay.
All right, we'll be right back.
This is Robert Vendetti, and you're listening to the podcast of OA.
All right, Myron, welcome back. Here we are. We got some responses from some listeners, and first one's from Daniel, and he's responding to episode 145. And quoting, he says, "Wow, I didn't even realize that there was a solo series depicting Hal's time as the Spectre, and that Morrison tied it in here." I to touch on that real quick, I thought that was really, really cool. When Hal Jordan got to spend time as being the Spectre. Spectre's been one of my favorite characters for a long time now. So he says, "Thanks for pointing it out, Myron. I might have to check it out. It's crazy the amount of general DC knowledge that Morrison has." Very true. And it's amazing how he can effortlessly tie it all together to make everything canon as if it was truly one continuous story. Also true. It does make one do their homework, though. We've talked about that many a times. Quote, "I'm on the fence about the annual, though. I went through it pretty fast and didn't find it too memorable. It also seemed a little preachy about our obsession with technology and our disregard with how we get it. But then it seemed to disregard it just as quickly for a joke. I will be interested to see if Morrison ties it in to a future storyline. It was nice to see the Jordan family and his cousin Hal Jr. back in action. I enjoyed him in the Green Lantern Green Arrow run. Thanks again for creating this site and podcast for us fans. It is always a fun part of the day to check in on the blog of OA." All right, well, first, Daniel, all points. Thanks for giving us some feedback, and thanks for the props. I agree with a lot of what he says. I mean, especially when it came to the annual. I think you and I even talked about how it was just that little filler, just to throw in there.
Right. And I really appreciate Daniel, spending the time to comment. And, one of the things I looked at is that Spectre run, for whatever reason, has never been collected. So you almost have to hunt down all the floppies. It was an interesting run. It was interesting watching Hal trying to turn the Spectre into the spirits of redemption versus the spirit of vengeance. That was really kind of neat, and you got to see a lot of interesting things there. It was a fun book. It didn't go over well, I don't think, with a lot of fans who were looking for Hal as Green Lantern. I think it was an effort by DC to try to pacify some of the fans. And it worked, but it didn't work. And eventually, when the Green Lantern books started not doing so well in sales, it was an opportunity to bring Hal back to Green Lantern land. And I kind of think they've almost tried to bury it, unfortunately. I do really appreciate you taking the time out to comment about the blog. One of the things I didn't realize, when I moved the site from Blogger to WordPress, I lost a bunch of articles. I must have published over 1,500 articles since I started the site, and I was going in and looking and realized it only went back to 2011. And I thought I started it in 2010, and I went back to the Blogger site because I still have it archived out there so I can go back and grab the missing articles and slowly rebuild some of the historical stuff. That's how I spend some of my time, is fixing the old stuff as well as trying to write new stuff. And I went back and looked, and sure enough, my first article was written in August of 2009. 2009. Wow. So this is actually the 10-year anniversary with the blog of O was last month. And it was actually my first article was a review of Green Lantern First Flight.
Oh, interesting.
So I restored that
Really
article.
cool.
Yeah, so I restored that article so that I have at least the oldest article still on the new site. But I still need to go back. It's a huge amount of work to go back and fix these articles because of all the HTML code. So I've been trying to plug along a little at a time, but I didn't realize it had been 10 years. And
That's a decade, man. That's a decade, Myron. Just think. Let's think about it like this. You were my age when you started this thing.
I'm not sure how that makes me feel.
It doesn't make either of us feel very good.
And it just reminded me, I started thinking about how many articles, and I was like, wow, I can't believe how much time I've put into this, and just in terms of writing articles and gathering content and changing the website's design a number of times over. And one person that is kind of the unsung hero of any of this stuff is my wife, who lets me spend all this time away from her doing these kind of things. And so I've always tell her how much I appreciate her, but this is just me publicly saying, if you ever get a chance to meet my wife, thank her, because she's just as much a part of this as anybody else is. But
I mean, 10 years. I mean, you're basically raising a child. I mean, when it comes to this kind of project.
Does that mean does that mean in 3 years it's going to start talking back?
It probably will. I mean, if it hasn't already, But I mean, yeah. I mean, that's just, you put a lot of time and effort in this, and I remember the early days when I first started listening to you and stuff like that, and keeping in mind too, if you go back that long, and that was back in the infancy of even podcast itself, and it was just new coming on the scene and stuff like that, and there wasn't as many podcasts back then as there is now, obviously, and all things change, but. You were one of the first ones around, especially that was devoted to Green Lantern.
Yeah, I think back then, there was the Lantern Cast, obviously, and then there's another podcast that I'm not even going to mention the name, but they don't really do much anymore, so I'm not going to bother pointing in that direction. But there were three of us, and now there's really just the two, and the Lantern Cast has been around even longer, not with the current incarnation of hosts, but they certainly have been around. They're the granddaddy of it all. But
it's amazing. Time flies, man.
It does. I hope to be doing this a lot longer. We'll see how I age.
True story.
But thanks, Daniel, for the feedback. We do appreciate it. And then I want to read John's comment. John commented on my review for issue 11 that came out. The article came out on the day the book came out. And he basically said, it looked to me towards the end of the issue, after they've arrested Zunder now, that there are some little green bubbles, light floating into the broken cosmic grail as everyone is leaving. This coincides with the Quaman climbing out of the dark multiverse, which is obviously a bad situation. Zunder now claimed that the Grail would be relit right before the start of the multi-crisis. So perhaps his big story wasn't just a story after all. And definitely John hit it right in the head. I missed that rereading it a couple times. And I was saying to you, Phil, off mic before we got started, I don't get review copies of the books from DC. So I'm buying the book the same day as everybody else is and trying to read it and digest the Morrison story and try to put together something that has meaning other than, yeah, I liked it, and some kind of analysis in a day turnaround time. And unfortunately, it's something I missed when I wrote my review. I just didn't catch it.
Right. And, it's easy to miss, especially in a dense book like these, I mean, like I said, I usually read them 2 or 3 times, and the first time it's just my run through. And then the second time it's like, okay, now I got to pay attention. And then usually if I do it a third time, it's usually to focus on things that I wasn't familiar with. So that's when I go look up in my source material, or I go to Google and check things out.
Yeah, that's kind of the way I do it too. The first time I'm reading it for the enjoyment factor, and then I'm going back and looking for things. And then, a third or fourth time I'm trying to pick out details and look for stuff. And just for whatever reason, maybe I didn't have my glasses on straight. I don't know. But I did not pick up that whole graphic at the end with the little balls of light going into it. And I think that's a really good catch. And that's one of the things I love about this community of fans is that people will share what they find. And if I do miss something, they point it out. And that's great because then we all get to benefit from it. So thank you for that comment. I do really greatly appreciate it. I'm trying to get DC to give me the advanced copies like they do the other sites, because I'd love to do, there's a site out there called Adventures in Poor Taste, and they have done some really, really good analysis of the Grant Morrison run. And they obviously get their books days in advance because their stories are so well developed, and they've obviously spent time crafting them. And the review they did for this issue was great because they looked back over the entirety of the run and analyzed each issue and kind of what it represents from a top level, looking at the themes of each issue and how they tie together. And it's something I just had not had the time to put together on my own.
And if anybody gets a chance, kind of do some research and look that up. It's how they broke it down is really, really, really interesting per book that came out. It was cool.
Yeah, I'll put a link to that review in the show notes. But they've done some really good analysis. I don't like to read reviews that other people do until I've got my own done, because I don't want to accidentally use something that somebody else has written or pick up on somebody else's idea.
Not only that, it taints your own perspective, because, unbeknownst to some of us, I mean, if we read a review, it's like reading reviews of a movie before it comes out. You already go into it with a preconceived notion, whether you know it or not. You just subliminally, it's there because you've read about it. So you're expecting those kind of things and you're going to look for it. But that's why I never really read. That's like with a lot of movies, I never read reviews because, number one, reviews to me about movies, it's all subjective, and everybody's relative when it comes to what they enjoy, like you may like something like I might not like it, and that's just the way the world works. And to me, a lot of times reviews taint my vision of what it is I'm reading, and I have to do them after the fact to see if my thoughts conflict with theirs or, align with them.
Right. It's, I've often looked at movie reviews as I don't particularly care for them because I've yet to find a reviewer who has the same sensibilities that I have. And I think that's key. Reviews are important if it's someone whose opinion is like yours, because it helps you, they're going to look at it through the same lens that you're looking at it. So their opinion is probably going to be similar to your own. Now, I know that my reviews for this series and every Green Lantern book is going to be different than somebody else's, because I'm not going to be quite as objective because I'm looking at it through the lens of a Green Lantern fan. If I'm reading a book that isn't an issue of the Green Lantern, let's say it's a Green Lantern's appearance in another book, I'm going to be looking at it not just as, is it a good story, but is it good for Green Lantern? Is it, is it good for the characters? So I'm less forgiving of some of the flaws of some things, especially when it's art pet peeves like missing rings and the ring on the wrong hand or white boots and those kind of things. Because for me, that's really important to have that continuity for making this feel like it's an organic universe. And for somebody else, they might not care. They may be looking at it just as the story and the art, and they don't really look at the details. And I don't. So my reviews may not be for everyone. I try to be as even-handed as I can. But I have my biases like everybody else does.
Sure. We all do. And we're all entitled to them.
Yep.
That's what makes the world go round.
All right. Well, that wraps up another episode. We'll be back in a couple weeks, and you and I are going to talk about Showcase 22, 23, and 24. That was requested by a listener in our last episode. So I'm really looking forward to jumping all the way back to 1959. Oh,
yeah. That's going to be super cool. I'm looking forward to that one.
Yep. It's going to be a lot of fun. So we should be getting together in a couple of weeks to record that. And until next time, everybody, keep your power ring charged. Treat each other really, really well, because we're all each other has is ourselves. And then make sure you make every day your brightest day.
The Podcast of OA is the official podcast of the blog of OA and a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network. Share your comments and questions by calling the show's voicemail line at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. You can send your emails to podcast@blogofoa.com. You can also find the Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA on Twitter and Facebook. Green Lantern and other related characters are the copyrighted property of DC Comics Incorporated and are used without permission. The Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA are fan productions and do not claim any ownership over the Green Lantern or any other copyrighted properties.